The armor had sat untouched for over 1,000 cycles, a relic of war buried in the vaults of the Varnak Confederation, rumored to have been forged by a long-dead civilization with knowledge lost to time. Countless alien species, warlords, champions, scientists, and fools had tried to bond with it. None had lasted more than a few seconds before the armor rejected them. Bones snapped, flesh boiled, and screams echoed through the chambers like curses. They called it the Void Skin. Sentient, they said. Aware and angry, its creators were wiped out, possibly by the armor itself. And now it waited, always waiting. That was until the humans came. Humans were late to the galactic stage, primitive, chaotic, and emotionally unstable. But their rise was fast. Too fast. They had a strange knack for breaking what others built and surviving what should have killed them, and that made them dangerous. Or maybe just different. Captain Reyna Morrow didn't look like a galactic savior. She wasn't bred for war or enhanced with cybernetic strength. Just a former scavenger from the outer colonies, now serving under a provisional peacekeeping unit attached to the Varnak borderlands. She had scars, deep ones, emotional and physical, but none of that mattered to the armor. Not yet. Her squad had stumbled across the hidden vault while chasing pirate signals in the Derex system. The energy readings were off the charts, and before anyone could stop her, Reyna stepped inside. "What is this place?" she'd whispered. "Classified," the Varnak tech said, jittering nervously. His skin shimmered in fear, an involuntary reflex. "You're not allowed to be here." She ignored him. The armor stood upright in the center of the room, mounted like a statue but thrumming like a beast. Black metal, carved with crimson veins pulsing softly, as if breathing. The moment Reyna saw it, she felt something twist in her chest. Not fear, not awe, recognition. Her hand moved without thinking, brushing against the plating. The tech screamed, "No!" But it was too late. A shockwave slammed through the room, hurling everyone back. Lights burst, alarms blared, and the ground cracked beneath her boots. Reyna didn't fall. The armor moved, its plating unfolded piece by piece, floating mid-air, and then it slid around her body like liquid steel. No screams, no melting, no rejection. It accepted her. The room fell silent, stunned. Then, as if awakened by her presence, the armor's core flared. A red blaze surged from the chest, pulsing like a heartbeat. Symbols once dead came to life. And somewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, deep in forgotten space, machines stirred. Old ones, deadly ones, ones waiting for a signal. Reyna collapsed to her knees as the armor fused completely. "Captain, are you okay?" A voice crackled in her ear. Her own voice replied, but it wasn't fully hers anymore. "Something's coming, something old, and it knows I'm here." She felt it. War had been asleep. And now it was wide awake. Reyna sat in the center of the ruined vault, the armor clinging to her like a second skin. It didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt alive, warm, almost like blood pulsed beneath it. She could hear it, not with her ears but somewhere deeper, like a whisper brushing against the back of her skull. A voice without language, a presence without shape. Her team stared at her like she was some kind of monster or a miracle. The Varnak tech, Thurn, backed away until he hit the wall. "It chose you," he muttered, trembling. "It chose you. That's not possible." Reyna turned toward him slowly, her every movement now perfectly balanced, too smooth to be natural. "You said no one could wear it." "They can't. Hundreds have tried. They died, screaming. That thing kills everything it touches." He looked like he might be sick. You're not supposed to be alive." "Well," she said flatly, "I guess no one told the armor that." The rest of her squad remained frozen in the corridor, weapons lowered but eyes wide. Even the hard-nosed Sergeant Kell, who had seen a decade of war on the Outer Rims, looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Cap?" he said cautiously. "You all right in there?" "I think so," Reyna answered. But she wasn't sure. Something inside her felt different, stronger, like every cell in her body was humming. The armor didn't just protect her, it was bonding with her, syncing, learning. Her HUD lit up with foreign symbols, scrolling too fast for her to process. Yet somehow she understood what they meant. It was ancient tech, way beyond anything in the galactic archives. Then she felt it, deep in her chest, like a warning bell. Her head snapped upward. "They're coming," she said. "Who?" Kell asked, but Reyna was already on her feet. "Something was sleeping out there, waiting for this armor to wake up, and now it knows I'm here." Back on their cruiser, alarms screamed. Thurn scrambled for a terminal. "I'm picking up multiple warp signatures. Fast, heavy, old tech. Not Varnak. Not anything modern." He looked up, pale. "They're not just coming. They've already arrived." Reyna walked past him, her boots thudding softly, the armor adjusting around her. Doors slid open before she even reached them. The ship recognized her now. Everything was sinking. "Get me visuals," she ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing a stretch of black space now glittering with red. Ships, dozens of them. Dark, jagged, ancient war machines that didn't belong to any known race. They were shaped like insects, spiked and crawling, as if they were grown, not built. And at the center of the fleet was something enormous. A carrier, or maybe a hive. Its hull was cracked and pulsing, its engines leaking a sickly green glow like a rotting wound. It moved slowly, but with terrifying purpose. "Who the hell are they?" Kell muttered. Thurn's voice cracked. "I've seen those designs in Forbidden Records. They're from before the collapse. That's pre-divide tech. That's impossible." Reyna stared at the screen, her heart pounding, not in fear, but with a strange certainty. "They're not here for the Varnak," she said. "They're not even here for the galaxy." Her eyes narrowed. "They came for me." Suddenly, the HUD in her helmet flared. A message appeared in alien text, but she didn't need a translation. "Welcome back, Wielder. War resumes." The cruiser shook violently as the first wave of energy struck its outer shields. Alarms flared. Red lights bathed the control room in panic. Outside, the alien fleet began surrounding them like wolves closing in on a wounded animal. Reyna didn't flinch. She could feel the hum of the armor syncing with the ship's systems. Without touching a single control, she accessed the cruiser's defense grid. Data surged through her thoughts like wildfire. Weapon schematics, shield positions, power reserves. It was overwhelming, but somehow manageable. The armor filtered it, organized it, taught her. "Defensive positions!" she shouted. "Divert full power to the forward shields. Brace for impact." Her crew stared at her. Thurn blinked. "How the hell do you know our shield modulation protocols?" "I didn't," she said, eyes fixed on the screen. "The armor does." Another blast slammed into them. The ship groaned, but held. Barely. Reyna turned toward Kell. "We can't win this in orbit. We need to land on the surface. Draw them away from the civilians." "Land. With that fleet out there?" he barked. "They don't want the ship. They want me," she said flatly. "So I give them what they want. And when they come for me, I make them regret it." The room went quiet. Nobody argued. 30 minutes later, the ship broke atmosphere, tearing through the clouds of a nearby uninhabited moon. It was all mountains and ash. No cities, no colonies, no witnesses. Perfect for a fight no one wanted recorded. Reyna stepped out of the drop hatch as soon as the cruiser touched down. The armor shifted around her, reinforcing her limbs, wrapping her back with what looked like wing-like extensions. Blades, maybe. The moment her boots hit the ground, the air around her rippled. The temperature dropped. Energy licked off her like static on a live wire. She wasn't just wearing the armor anymore. She was the armor. The alien ships followed fast. They didn't land like normal vessels. They burrowed into the ground, digging, crawling, cracking the crust beneath them. And from their open maws, they released creatures unlike anything anyone had seen. Not biological, not fully mechanical either. Hybrids, twisted ancient war beasts. They moved like predators, hunched low, with limbs that bent wrong and eyes that glowed like coals. Some had multiple heads, others hovered without wings. All of them locked onto Reyna the moment they arrived. And they didn't roar. They hissed, low, unified, as if speaking in a tongue meant for nightmares. Kel's voice buzzed in her earpiece. "You're not fighting that army alone?" Reyna didn't respond right away. She stepped forward, her armored boots melting the ground beneath her. The wind picked up, whipping ash into the air like snow. "You're right," she said. Then she raised her arm. The armor lit up with burning red lines across her limbs and chest. The ground cracked beneath her. Her voice changed again, layered, distorted, old. "I'm not alone," she said. All around her, strange, dark shapes rose from the stone. Figures, ancient constructs buried beneath the surface, forgotten war machines, tall, skeletal things with blade arms and shielded backs. Not alive, not dead. The armor had awakened them. Her army had been buried with the armor all along, and now they stood behind her. One of the creatures hissed and charged. Reyna didn't move. She waited until it was 2 feet from her. Then she raised her hand and snapped her fingers. The construct to her right lunged forward, driving its blade straight through the beast's chest. Reyna stared at the others. "Come then," she whispered. "Let's finish what your master started." The war hadn't just awakened. It remembered. The sky turned black as the alien fleet fully descended, blotting out the stars above the ash-covered moon. Ships hung like vultures, motionless for now, but ominous. They were waiting, observing, measuring her. Reyna stood at the center of a slowly growing army, ancient constructs, nearly 24 of them, each over 7 feet tall, carved from some kind of dark alloy that shimmered like obsidian under lightning. Their forms weren't perfect. Some looked half-shattered, limping or missing limbs, but they responded to her presence like loyal war dogs. One moved beside her and let out a grinding hum, as if eager to be unleashed. Behind her, Kel and the rest of the squad held the outer perimeter of the drop zone, wide-eyed and silent. No one dared ask where these things came from. No one dared get close, either. "Status on the creatures?" Reyna asked, voice calm despite the chaos. Kel's voice crackled back. "They've stopped advancing, holding formation at about 400 meters. Still surrounding us, but not attacking. It's like they're waiting for something." "They are," Reyna said, eyes locked on the sea of hybrid beasts across the broken plain. "They're waiting for their master." And just as she said it, he came. The ground trembled, the air pulsed, and then from the largest alien ship a figure descended. He didn't ride a craft. He was the craft. Towering, armored in black and crimson like a living monument of death, the being floated down in absolute silence. His body shifted constantly, like molten armor refusing to settle. He landed with a thunderous crack that shattered a ring of stone around him. Then, for the first time, the two sides were face to face. The wielder and the warbringer. Reyna didn't flinch. The figure stood taller than her by at least 3 feet, with a jagged crown fused into its helmet and 6 glowing eyes that burned like dying stars. When he spoke, it wasn't in sound. It was in pressure, in pulses, in thoughts slammed directly into her skull. "Wielder, you were not meant to rise." She stepped forward, her own armor reacting, surging red light through her veins. "And yet, here I am." "You wear our legacy like a thief." "No," Reyna said. "I was chosen, and I think that pisses you off." The Warbringer tilted his head. "You were chosen by a mistake. That armor was never meant for your kind. You bleed, you rot, you die so easily." "I also fight," she said, stepping forward again. Her constructs moved with her, forming ranks on either side. "And unlike you, I don't need 1,000 years of slumber to remember how." The Warbringer raised one hand. A low vibration passed through the entire moon. Across the battlefield, every hybrid beast began to shift. Then they charged. Hundreds of them. Reyna didn't hesitate. "Form ranks!" she roared, her voice echoing not just in the air, but in the minds of her army. The constructs responded instantly, slamming into position in front of her, shield arms locking together like an ancient phalanx. Her squad fell behind, forming their own defense perimeter. The first wave of beasts crashed into the construct line, and chaos erupted. Steel clashed with bone, blades pierced chests, sparks and black blood filled the air. Reyna was already in motion, her armor propelling her forward like a missile. She collided with a hulking hybrid, splitting it in half with a single sweep of her arm. The armor formed a blade as needed, morphed into claws, became a cannon, always adapting, always perfect. She was fury incarnate, but even as she cut through the wave, she felt the Warbringer watching, unmoving, calculating. She knew this wasn't the real battle. This was a test. He was measuring her. What he didn't know, what he couldn't feel, was the storm building inside her. Because the armor wasn't just connecting her to an army, it was connecting her to a memory, and that memory was waking up. The battlefield burned beneath a blood-red sky, scorched by plasma fire and the violent dance of ancient weapons. Reyna moved like a ghost through the chaos, her body no longer her own, but an extension of the armor's will. Every strike she landed was flawless. Every dodge was pre-calculated. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was remembering. Flashes of something unfamiliar, yet deeply embedded, slammed into her mind between kills. A tower of black stone. A voice calling out her name, but not the name Reyna. A war not of her time. The armor wasn't just protecting her. It was feeding her a past. Its past. A hybrid beast lunged from her blind spot, screeching with a mouth full of blades. The armor reacted before she could. A spike jutted from her elbow, and with a twist of her torso, it tore through the creature's throat. It fell, writhing, choking on its own corrupted blood. Then the memory came again, clearer. A battlefield of broken stars, ships burning in orbit, millions screaming through silent space. She stood at the center of it all, but it wasn't her body. It was someone else's. Same armor, different soul. She gritted her teeth, trying to push the image away. "Not now," she hissed, but the armor didn't stop. The Warbringer raised his hand once more, and from the skies, beams of green fire rained down. They weren't aimed at Reyna. They were aimed at her constructs. Entire columns were vaporized, limbs scattered across the field. Ash replaced steel. The line was cracking. Kel's voice buzzed in her ear. "We can't hold this much longer. Cap, we're getting shredded." Reyna glanced toward her squad. They were pinned behind a broken ridge, laying down fire, but surrounded. Her soldiers were human, fragile, mortal. She could feel their fear. Then the memory struck again. Violent and full. A different war. Another wielder. A woman, eyes blazing with light, standing before a crowd of dying worlds. "You were made to carry the war," the voice whispered in her skull. You are not the first. You are the last. Reyna stumbled as the vision faded. Her breath came hard, steam escaping the vents in her armor. She dropped to one knee as pain surged through her spine. But she understood now. The armor didn't just need a host, it needed a match. Someone who had nothing left to lose. Someone desperate enough to give themselves to it fully. She hadn't just been chosen. She had qualified. Reyna rose, the armor locking tight around her ribs. A strange new strength flowed into her legs, her arms. The heat of war surged through her blood, no longer terrifying, almost welcome. She turned her gaze to the Warbringer. "You're afraid of me," she said aloud, voice crackling through the air. The Warbringer's head tilted. "We are not afraid. We are inevitable." "Bullshit," she growled. "If you were so inevitable, you wouldn't have waited 1,000 years for someone dumb enough to touch this armor. You were hoping it would never wake up again." She raised her arms, and the ground trembled beneath her. The constructs that had fallen began to stir. Limbs regrew. Armor reformed. The armor wasn't just controlling them. It was rebuilding them, rewriting broken code in real time. Where one had fallen, two now rose. And then Reyna did something unexpected. She called out to her squad. "All of you, stand up now!" Kell's voice came back. "We're pinned. We don't have—" "Stand the fuck up!" Silence. Then slowly, one by one, her team rose from behind cover, battered and bleeding. She extended her hand. A wave of red energy pulsed from her core, washing over them. The armor didn't stop with her constructs. Her squad's suits began to shimmer, enhance, adapt. Not full armor, no, but enough. Enough to fight. Enough to survive. "Holy shit," someone whispered. "She's spreading it." Reyna's eyes locked on the Warbringer once more. "I'm not your past," she said. "I'm your reckoning." Then she charged. This time, the Warbringer moved to meet her. 2 titans, 2 legacies, and between them, the fate of 1,000 silent wars. They collided like meteors. The moment Reyna's armored fist met the Warbringer's blade arm, the shockwave split the ground between them. Stone shattered, air cracked, and soldiers on both sides were thrown backward like paper caught in a hurricane. The sky itself seemed to recoil. Reyna spun with the force, using the armor's momentum to dodge the Warbringer's second strike, a sweeping blow meant to slice her in half. His blade hit the ground where she'd stood and sent molten rock spraying into the air. She came up behind him, slammed both fists into his back, and drove him forward several feet. He didn't fall, but he stumbled. He hadn't expected her to hit that hard. Good. The Warbringer turned, eyes burning brighter. He extended his arm, and the blade morphed, stretching into a jagged whip of black energy. It lashed toward her. She ducked, but it grazed her shoulder, carving through the armor with a screech that echoed through her bones. The pain was real, raw and hot, but the armor sealed the wound almost instantly. "You're slow," Reyna said through clenched teeth. "You've been asleep too long. And you are new, arrogant," he lunged. They traded blows with the fury of titans. Every strike from the Warbringer was meant to kill. Every counter from Reyna was precise, strategic. She wasn't trying to overpower him. She was learning. Each movement, each adjustment in his weapon was fed into her armor's systems and adapted against. What he didn't realize was that while he was fighting with old strength, she was fighting with evolving strength. Still, he was relentless. He drove her back with a flurry of rapid blows, forcing her to leap into the air. Her armor responded instantly, sprouting jet boosters from her back and heels. She launched upward, flipping in mid-air, and came crashing down with a seismic punch that cratered the entire battlefield. The Warbringer roared in frustration, staggered again, but he wasn't finished. He raised both arms, and the air shimmered with heat. A ripple spread across the field, and suddenly everything stopped. Time didn't freeze, but it slowed, just enough for Reyna to feel it. Do you know why your kind was never meant to wield the void skin? The Warbringer's voice filled her head. She didn't answer. Because humans feel too much. You drown in your own noise, rage, grief, guilt. You are chaos pretending to be order. The air pulsed. Reyna felt the memories creeping in again, sharper this time, like broken glass under her skin. A child's scream. Her mother, face burned, reaching out through smoke. The smell of burning colony metal and the roar of pirate engines leaving her behind. Number not now. She clenched her fists. The armor around her flared, veins of red light pulsing harder. You use pain like a weapon, the Warbringer hissed, but it will consume you. You think I use it? Reyna spat. Pain built me. She charged again, breaking through the time-slow field with a burst of will and fury. The armor responded with a shriek of metal. This time, she didn't aim for the Warbringer's weapon. She aimed for his core. She drove a punch straight into his chest. The armor howled as her fist cracked through his plating. The Warbringer let out a distorted bellow, part scream, part mechanical glitch, and reeled backward, smoke pouring from the dent in his body. She pressed the attack, slashing, striking, relentless. With each hit, the armor fed her more energy, more clarity, more memory, not just hers, all the previous wielders, their final moments, their victories, their regrets. And one truth burned through it all. This war had happened before. And the last time, it hadn't ended. It had been sealed. That's why the armor waited. That's why it refused others. It wasn't just looking for strength. It was looking for vengeance. Reyna ducked another attack and drove her knee into the Warbringer's head, knocking him off balance. Then she jumped, straight into the sky. Her armor surged with stored energy, a glow blinding and angry. She raised her arms above her head. Below her, the Warbringer looked up, his 6 eyes narrowing. Too late. She came down like judgment, and the battlefield erupted. The blast tore a canyon into the moon's crust. Flames erupted in all directions as Reyna's impact cratered the ground beneath the Warbringer. A shockwave rolled across the battlefield, flinging both friend and foe like rag dolls. Dust clouds swallowed everything, and for a moment, the world went silent. Reyna rose slowly from the center of the impact zone, the armor hissing and steaming across her body. The chest piece pulsed violently, overcharged and burning red. Her breath was ragged, the kind that came from pushing both body and mind past their limit. Her knuckles throbbed beneath the armor, and her muscles trembled. That last strike had nearly torn her apart. But he was down. The Warbringer lay in the shattered rock, embedded halfway into the earth. His armor cracked, faceplate dented, one of his arms sparking and twitching without purpose. For the first time, he looked less like a god and more like a broken machine. She walked toward him, every step heavy with dust and fury. Her constructs flanked her, battered but still standing. Behind them, her squad, Kel and the others, emerged from cover, staring in awe. They had seen what she did. They had felt it. Kel's voice finally crackled over comms. Is it over? Reyna didn't answer right away. Her eyes never left the Warbringer's body. Something felt off. Wrong. Too quiet. Too still. And then the ground shifted beneath her feet. Not cracked. Breathed. A low groan echoed up from the planet's crust. A vibration that shook the air, the sky, her bones. The Warbringer's damaged body twitched again. But this time, he wasn't moving on his own. He was being dragged, pulled downward by something below. What the hell? Reyna muttered, backing away. Then the Warbringer's chest split open, not from damage, but willingly, as if surrendering something buried deep inside. From the cavity, a black mist poured upward. It didn't behave like gas. It coiled, thick and intelligent. It reached toward the sky like fingers, then sank into the moon's crust. And the voice returned. But it wasn't the Warbringer. It was older. "You opened the gate, little wielder." Reyna froze. He was never the threat. He was the lock. The ground beneath her exploded. A black spire, wider than a cruiser and tall as a mountain, erupted from the surface, spewing chunks of rock into orbit. It wasn't metal. It wasn't stone. It was something alive. The tip twisted as it grew, splitting open into tendrils that screamed into the sky. The Warbringer's broken body was yanked into it and absorbed like fuel. All across the battlefield, the hybrid beasts stopped moving. Every single one of them dropped where they stood, lifeless. They were never meant to win. They were just the distraction. Reyna stared in horror as more spires began to rise in the distance. 5, 10, more every second. And from the holes they left behind, something massive stirred, something buried long ago by beings who understood fear better than any living race ever could. Thurn's voice broke through on the channel, panicked and hoarse. "This isn't an invasion, it's a resurrection. The armor, it wasn't built for war. It was built to stop it." Reyna's breath caught in her throat. It all made sense now. The armor didn't choose warriors because it wanted to conquer. It chose survivors, people broken by pain, hardened by loss, the kind of soul who would never let it fall into the wrong hands. Because it wasn't a weapon. It was a seal, and she had just broken it. The sky above the moon shimmered and tore open. A rift, gigantic, howling with static and light. Through it came something immense. She couldn't comprehend its shape. It shifted constantly, eyes without bodies, limbs without logic. It wasn't a creature. It was a force. And it was free. Her legs nearly gave out. She had won the fight, but she had lost the war. Kel's voice whispered through the silence. "Reyna, what do we do now?" She looked up, jaw clenched, heart breaking. "We finish it," she said, "even if it killed her, especially if it did. The world was ending, and Reyna was the one who had lit the match. The spires howled like dying gods as they reached toward the stars, splitting the moon apart at its core. Cracks spread in all directions, magma boiling from deep within, spilling like blood across the ash-covered battlefield. Above, the rift in the sky widened, reality bending at its edges. The creature on the other side loomed without form, its mass unfathomable, as if it were pressing against existence itself, waiting to step through. And it was her fault. She could feel the armor trembling now, not from fear, but rage. It was screaming, not in her ears, but in her very soul. It knew what was coming. It had fought this thing before, long ago, and it had lost. That was why it sealed itself, why it rejected every unworthy host until her. "I should have known," Reyna whispered, her voice raw. "You weren't a weapon. You were a warning." But there was no time for guilt, no room for regret, not anymore. The ground beneath her cracked violently. One of the spires erupted beside her, nearly toppling her as flaming debris tore into the sky. She caught herself, boots digging into molten rock, armor hissing as it cooled her flesh. Behind her, the constructs had fallen again. This time for good. Whatever energy sustained them was gone. Drained. Spent. Her squad stood at the edge of the crater, watching in stunned silence. They were soldiers. Brave. But this wasn't a battle anyone had prepared for. Reyna turned to Kel. "Get the others back to the cruiser, now." "We're not leaving you," he said, shaking his head. "You can't stop that thing alone." "I'm not stopping it," she said softly. I'm sealing it, just like the last wielder did. His eyes widened. But they died. I know. She turned back toward the sky. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to go. Kel hesitated. Then he nodded. You better make this count. She smiled, a bitter, cracked thing. I always do. As her squad fell back, Reyna stepped forward, toward the rift, toward the thing that should not be. The closer she got, the more her vision blurred, as if reality itself was being rewritten. And then, the armor spoke, not in words, in memory. She saw them, all of them, the previous wielders, dozens, hundreds, men, women, beings without names or forms, across centuries, across galaxies. All of them had fought, all had failed, except one, the last one, the one who gave the armor its final command. Wait, watch, choose the one who won't give up. And it had waited. All this time. Reyna reached the edge of the rift. The creature saw her. It turned, if turning was even possible for something that didn't obey the rules of space. It felt her, recognized the armor, and it screamed. Not a sound. A presence. A tidal wave of hatred so deep it froze her breath. But Reyna didn't stop. She lifted her hand. The armor responded, lighting up like a dying star. From her chest, a core emerged, a sphere of red, pulsing with every heartbeat she had left. Initiate final protocol? The armor asked, for the first time seeking permission. She nodded. The core rose into the air, vibrating with unbearable energy. Her legs gave out as it tore from her. Blood ran from her nose. Her vision dimmed. The rift began to collapse inward. The creature screamed again, lashing forward. But it was too late. Reyna, barely conscious, whispered her last command. Close the door. The core detonated. Light swallowed everything, red, blinding, pure. The spires shattered. The rift imploded. The creature howled as it was torn backward, sucked into the void it had tried to escape. The sky sealed shut, screaming as it folded in on itself. Silence returned. Ash fell like snow. When the dust cleared, the battlefield was still. The spires were gone. The sky was whole. The armor lay shattered at the center of a smoldering crater. Reyna was gone. No body. No trace. Just a single piece of armor, her chest plate, still warm to the touch. Kel picked it up days later, standing quietly with the rest of the squad. She wasn't supposed to win, he said. Thurn shook his head. She didn't win. She chose to lose better than anyone else could have. They left the plate on a stone. A marker, a warning, and a promise. No one else would wear it, not ever again. Because war had finally gone quiet. And Reyna Morrow, last of the wielders, had made sure it stayed that way. The war had already been going on for 7 years. Not Earth's war, no. This one was bigger. It was a galaxy-wide nightmare fought across hundreds of systems between two ancient superpowers, the Kavor Dominion and the Threxian Fold. Billions of lives lost, planets burned, civilizations reduced to dust. And the humans? They weren't even in the fight, not yet. Humanity had only recently cracked faster-than-light travel. They were late to the galactic party, still busy trying to map star charts and figure out what the hell a quantum gravity sling even was. Compared to the Kavor and the Threxians, races that had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years, humans were infants, primitive even. A species known more for their unpredictability than any real tactical value. But that changed fast, real fast. It started when the Kavor, desperate and losing ground, sent out a wide-frequency distress call. Their fleet had just been annihilated in Sector 9X9. Hundreds of ships gone, their generals dead. The Threxians were marching straight for the Kavor core worlds, and no one could stop them. No one, until Earth answered. Most of the Cavor thought it was a joke. Humans were untested. Their military numbers were laughable. Their ships were clunky. Their weapons were outdated by about 3,000 years. But they said they'd help. Said they had a few ships that could be deployed. Tactical support, they called it. No one expected anything from them. The Cavor didn't even send a formal ambassador, just a junior diplomat and a rundown hanger on a backwater moon for the meeting. But the humans didn't seem to care. They showed up smiling, relaxed, a dozen officers in sharp black uniforms, all with that strange human confidence. Like they were walking into a game, not a war, and leading them was a man named Captain Ray Holloway. The Cavor junior diplomat, a blue-scaled creature named Voruk, tried to keep things polite. "We thank you for your willingness to participate, but you must understand the situation is extremely dire." Holloway just shrugged. "Dire's what we do best." Voruk blinked all four eyes. "We are not sure your current technology can even withstand a single Threxian assault. Are you sure your people are ready?" Ray grinned. "We brought beer and nukes. That usually covers it." The humans deployed 5 ships. 5. Against a Threxian war caravan of over 70 destroyers. The math didn't make sense. The Cavor generals were furious. They wanted to withdraw support immediately. But the humans were already en route to the hot zone before anyone could stop them. No one expected them to survive. In fact, many of the Cavor secretly thought it would be better if the Threxians wiped them out quickly. At least then they wouldn't be a political embarrassment. But the battle in the Jalon Belt rewrote everything. The Threxians arrived with overwhelming force. Their ships were sleek, jagged, and black as void. Plasma beams stretched miles through space, lighting up the belt in bright arcs of destruction. And then, the humans struck. They didn't use formation patterns. They didn't stick to traditional tactics. Their ships moved erratically, unpredictably, ducking behind asteroids, using the debris as shields. They jammed communication signals with old-world radio frequencies. They hacked Threxian targeting systems by flooding them with raw Earth music, blasting metal, rock, jazz through deep space channels. Then came the surprise. One human ship broke through the front line, looking like it had been damaged. The Threxians closed in, hungry for the kill. That's when the ship detonated, not with a nuke, but with a graviton imploder. A device no one knew humans even had. The implosion dragged 10 Threxian ships into a compressed singularity. Gone. Just like that. The battle turned in 10 minutes. When it was over, the Cavor watched from orbit as the 5 human ships drifted calmly through the wreckage of the Threxian fleet. They hadn't just survived. They'd won. The galaxy started paying attention. And back on Earth, Captain Holloway lit a cigar, looked at the comm feed, and said, "So, when's the next round?" The aftermath of the Jalon Belt skirmish sent shockwaves through every military command in the known galaxy. Cavor High Command scrambled to update their databases. Every analyst, every tactician, every AI simulation was rerun. Same results. Those 5 human ships should have been vaporized. But they weren't. Instead, they'd shredded a far superior Threxian force, using tactics that didn't make sense, weapons no one thought they had, and, perhaps most disturbing of all, a level of improvisation that bordered on madness. Back on the Cavor capital world, the grand strategist Morka Yell, a war veteran with 800 years of service, stood in stunned silence as the holofeed played the battle footage over and over again. The human ships weaved in and out of Threxian fire, using physics-defying maneuvers, diving into gravity wells, slingshotting around asteroids like lunatics. "They fly like they have no fear of death," he muttered. "They don't," said a voice from behind. It was Voruk, the junior diplomat who had first spoken to the humans. They call it crazy back on Earth. We call it suicidal. But it works. Morkael turned to him, his 4 eyes narrowed. Bring me this Captain Holloway. Meanwhile, aboard the UNS Black Rain, Captain Ray Holloway was already in deep conversation with his crew. They weren't celebrating. There were no parades, no grand speeches, just a quiet debriefing in the ship's galley, a few beers, and the hum of cooling systems. All right, let's break it down, Holloway said, running a hand through his short, graying hair. What worked, what didn't? Lieutenant Vargas leaned forward. The graviton imploder took out 10 ships, but we lost the Eclipse. That tech's a one-time deal, Captain. We don't have another. I know, Holloway said. Still worth it. What about comms? We screwed their frequencies good, said Tech Officer Lee. Used old Earth radio waves to throw off their AI eye-parsing systems. Classic tactic. They didn't even know how to process a saxophone solo. Ray chuckled. Jazz wins wars. Who knew? They all laughed quietly, but beneath the humor was something else, a storm building. Because they all knew this wasn't over. The Threxians weren't going to let this humiliation go unanswered. No empire that big ever did. As expected, less than 48 standard hours later, a formal Kavor envoy arrived. Not the junior diplomat this time. A full delegation, headed by none other than Grand Strategist Morkael himself. The old warrior stepped aboard the Black Rain, flanked by guards and aides, his eyes scanning every detail of the human warship like a predator assessing a new species. Ray met him at the docking bay, wearing his standard black field uniform and a cocky smile. Welcome aboard, he said, holding out a hand. Morkael didn't take it. Humans, he said, voice dry and almost disgusted. You break every rule of warfare we've followed for millennia. Ray didn't flinch. Good. That's the only reason we're still alive. They walked together down the corridor, the tension almost physical between them. You are unpredictable, Morkael said. Unstable, reckless. And that's exactly what makes us valuable, Ray replied. Your enemies don't know how to fight us because you don't know how to fight us. Morkael stopped walking. You won one battle. Do not confuse that with victory. Ray turned, looked the alien dead in the eyes. You're not asking us for help anymore, are you? You're here because you need us. Because if you don't have us on your side, this whole war is going to end with your people kneeling to Threxian overlords. Silence. Finally, Morkael nodded once, a slow, painful gesture. You will have resources, command access, full operational integration. But know this, if you ever turn your tactics on us, if you ever betray the Kavor— We won't, Ray interrupted. But if we did, you wouldn't see it coming. The old general didn't respond. He just walked away. Back in the command deck, Ray looked over the tactical maps. Dozens of red zones flickered across the galaxy. The war was far from over. But something had changed now, something fundamental. Humans weren't outsiders anymore. They were game changers, and both sides knew it. We just became the wild card, Vargas said, watching the map light up with new orders from the Kavor. Ray nodded. Let's make sure they never forget why humans don't play by the rules. The Kavor War Council had never moved this fast before. Within days, new directives were issued. Human commanders were being embedded across multiple fleets, sometimes replacing decades-old military protocols with wild, unpredictable strategies. The traditionalists hated it, but they had no choice. The Threxians had begun to accelerate their push, emboldened by how weak the Dominion had become. Captain Ray Holloway and his crew weren't just a curiosity anymore, they were a necessity. Orders came in. Operation Black Gale, a coordinated strike deep inside Threxian-occupied space. The target, a manufacturing moon called Kor Vesh, known for churning out thousands of Threxian battle drones every week. The Cavor had tried to disable it 5 times. They lost hundreds of ships each attempt. Now it was the humans' turn. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Human Squadron would breach Threxian perimeter defenses using distraction and cloaked warp hops, while Cavor long-range ships hammered from a distance. Once inside the perimeter, human commandos would land on Kor Vesh, sabotage the drone factory core, and extract before detonation. The Cavor generals predicted a 2% survival chance. Ray Holloway just laughed when he read the numbers. Guess we'll make history then. The UNS Black Rain, accompanied by 4 other human warships, launched at 0500 galactic standard. Inside the cramped strike room, Ray stood before his team. 12 men and women, each hand-picked from Earth's deadliest units. No aliens, no politics, just pure human instinct. You've read the mission brief. You've seen the stats, Ray said, his tone low but calm. I won't lie to you. This mission is a death wish. But if we pull it off, we shut down one of the biggest Threxian threats in this war. We hit them where it hurts. One of the soldiers, a tall woman with burn scars across her left cheek, raised her hand lazily. So what happens if we don't make it? Ray grinned. Then we die loud enough to make 'em think twice next time. Everyone chuckled, not because it was funny, but because they all knew that was the truth. Earth had always done things differently. They didn't believe in dying quietly. The approach to Kor Vesh was pure chaos. Threxian scanner drones covered the area like a cloud of hornets. Ray ordered all ships to shut off active emissions and coast through with full stealth, silent engines, no signals, no light. 3 human ships were hit before even reaching the orbit line. No screams. Just red markers blinking out on Ray's HUD. He clenched his jaw but didn't blink. Keep going. Once they broke into low orbit, the Threxians unleashed hell. Swarms of automated cannons erupted from the moon's surface, painting the black of space with a storm of orange and blue. Launch the pods, Ray barked. The human strike team jettisoned in drop pods, metal coffins hurtling through plasma fire at supersonic speeds. Most didn't make it. 2 pods were vaporized mid-air. Another lost control and crashed into a communications tower. The rest? They hit dirt. Hard. Ray's pod slammed into the rocky surface, tearing through steel layers of Kor Vesh's outer hull. He unstrapped fast, heart pounding, ears ringing. "Squad, check in!" he yelled through comms. Static. Then a voice. Vargas. "I'm in. West sector. Took a hit. Legs busted, but I'm moving." Another voice. Corporal Jules. "I got eyes on the core tunnel. 3 clicks out." They were scattered, but alive. "Rally at Vector 6, Ray ordered. "We're blowing this place to hell." The Threxians came fast, faster than expected. 8-legged drone guards emerged from the dust, crawling across walls and ceilings like metallic spiders. One of them dropped down in front of Ray, eyes glowing red, claws twitching. He emptied his rifle into its skull, then kept running. By the time they reached the core entrance, they were down to 6. Bloodied, burned, but unbroken, they planted the charges, synchronized detonation, and began the escape run. Every hallway was a maze of fire and shrapnel. The Threxians weren't just defending, they were panicking. For the first time, it felt like fear. Ray was the last one to the evac point. He dragged Vargas over his shoulder, her leg hanging limp and bleeding. The extraction shuttle hovered 20 meters above a collapsing platform, shield barely holding. Ray leaped. They made it. Barely. The factory exploded behind them, sending a shockwave that cracked the moon's crust and lit the void with fire. Silence in the shuttle. Then Vargas, blood on her face, whispered, "We just crippled their entire drone production line." Ray looked back at the burning moon. "Yeah," he said, "and we're just getting started." The return to Cavor space was nothing like what Ray expected. There was no celebration, no cheering crowds, no parade, just silence and a line of stern-looking alien officials waiting at the docking bay. The black rain landed with its hull scorched, engines coughing black smoke, and half its lights flickering from overload. Ray stepped out, limping slightly, his body aching from the shock of the blast. Vargas followed behind him on crutches, still bleeding through her bandages. The rest of the surviving crew looked like ghosts, tired, burned, hardened by something that went beyond pain. Standing at the front of the Cavor officials was strategist Morka Yell, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You succeeded," he said, voice low. Ray didn't answer immediately. He looked past the alien's shoulder, at the cold faces of the high command. "We lost 4 ships, dozens of soldiers. That moon was a meat grinder," he said. "But yeah, we succeeded." Morkayel gave a nod, slow and deliberate. "The Threxians have not launched a counteroffensive. Their drone supply lines are in chaos. You did more in 2 days than we managed in 5 years." Ray arched a brow. "You don't sound happy about it." "We are not used to depending on outsiders," Morkayel admitted. "Especially ones who fight like mad beasts." Ray smirked. Mad beasts get results. Later that night, Ray sat alone in his quarters. The lights were dim, and an old earth jazz track played softly in the background. He stared at the hollow screen in front of him, footage of the Khor Vesh assault, slowed down and replayed over and over again. Each explosion, each scream on the comms, each life lost. They had won. But the cost was rising. A message pinged across the screen. "Priority transmission." He tapped to open it. A face flickered into view. A woman, dark-haired, sharp eyes, dressed in the sleek black of Earth's covert military wing. The badge on her collar read ISD, Intelligence and Strategic Division. "Captain Holloway," she said with a cold smile, "you've made quite an impression. Earth Command wants you to know they're paying attention." Ray leaned back in his chair. "That's supposed to scare me?" "Number just reminding you that not everyone's thrilled about our cozy little alliance with the Cavor. Some think you're getting too close." "Close?" Ray scoffed. "We're not friends. We're just useful." "Exactly," she said. "And when humans become too useful, they stop being underestimated. That's when we become targets." He didn't answer. She continued, voice low. "Word is, the Threxians are shifting tactics. They're starting to study human combat patterns. They're preparing for you. So the next time you walk into a battle, Captain, you might not catch them off guard." Ray shut off the screen. The warning came true faster than anyone thought. 2 weeks later, a Cavor outpost on the edge of the Zareth corridor was attacked. No warning, no chatter, just total silence and a burst of distorted signals. When scout ships arrived, they found the entire base gone, just a crater where the station used to be. And in that crater, burned into the rock, was a symbol no one had ever seen before. A crude human skull, wrapped in Threxian language. It wasn't just war anymore. It was personal. Ray stood in front of the Cavor War Council as they analyzed the image. "They're mocking us," Morkayel said. Your kind." Ray stared at the symbol, jaw clenched. "No, they're warning us. They're saying they've figured us out." Another Cavor general hissed through sharp teeth. "This is retaliation. They want to lure you out, force a direct confrontation." Ray smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then they'll get one." Back on the black rain, the crew gathered in the briefing room. The atmosphere was heavy. Half the seats were empty now. filled only by memories. Ray stood before them, a new mission forming in his head. One they hadn't authorized. One the Cavor wouldn't like. The Threxians think they understand us now. They're expecting brute force. Suicide missions. Noise, he said, pacing. But we're going to flip the script. Vargas raised an eyebrow. What's the plan? Ray stopped, eyes cold. We take the fight straight to their throne world. The room went silent. You're talking about a death sentence, Lee said. That system's locked down with 10 defense grids and enough firepower to turn a planet inside out. Ray nodded. Exactly. That's why they'll never see it coming. The Cavor High Command flat out refused the idea. You cannot attack the Threxian throne world, Morka barked, slamming a fist onto the war table. It is suicide. It is madness. Ray stood across from him, arms folded, expression unreadable. He'd expected this reaction. Suicide was flying 5 ships into 70 and winning, Ray replied. Madness was bombing Corvesh and getting out alive. This? He leaned in, voice calm. This is strategy, the kind they don't expect from humans anymore. Morka upper set of eyes narrowed, while his lower pair flicked rapidly. Cavor body language for stress. We are allies. You cannot operate without coordination. Ray didn't blink. Then coordinate faster. Back aboard the Black Rain, the mood was different. The crew was quiet, but determined. Nobody questioned Ray, not because they blindly trusted him, but because he'd dragged them through hell and back more than once. When he spoke, it wasn't with rank. It was with experience, with weight. He stood before them now, a 3-dimensional hollow of the Threxian throne world spinning slowly behind him. Vel Taraxis, a planet wrapped in planetary shields, surrounded by 6 moons, each one a fortified war platform. According to every known tactical model, it was impenetrable. Ray tapped the hollow. The image zoomed into a narrow gap in the outer defense ring, Node 12, a repair sector where shield protocols rotated every 90 seconds. A flaw, small and brief, but real. We'll enter during the rotation gap. It's only open for 17 seconds, but it's enough. Lieutenant Lee looked up. And once we're in? Ray's eyes were steel. We go quiet. We get to the surface. We plant a hyperfusion warhead right under their central command dome, and then we vanish. Vargas leaned back, shaking her head slowly. You're betting our lives on a glitch in their system. Ray nodded. Exactly, because no one else will. 2 days later, the mission began. No Grand Fleet, no Armada, just 3 ships. Black Rain, carrying the infiltration team. UNS Harbinger, retrofitted for jamming and stealth support. UNS Remnant, a decoy ship rigged to emit false battle signatures and draw fire. The Remnant would jump in first, cause chaos, die loud. While the Threxians scrambled, the other 2 ships would sneak through the Node 12 gap, slingshot around the 4th moon, and descend to Vel Taraxis under cloak. Everyone on board knew this was a one-way mission. No rescue, no fallback. Ray gathered the infiltration team, only 9 now. Veterans, survivors. Every one of them had seen things no human ever should. He looked them in the eyes. This isn't about Earth anymore. This is about every species that's been stepped on, enslaved, wiped out by the Threxians. We're not just striking back. We're sending a message. Humanity doesn't kneel. They didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just nodded. The jump into Threxian space hit like a thunderclap. Immediately, the Remnant began its suicide run, blasting false signals and releasing decoy drones like confetti. The Threxians bit hard. Within seconds, the entire orbital defense system lit up, focusing every gun on the screaming, chaotic mess of the decoy ship. Black Rain and Harbinger slid through Node 12's gap like whispers in a hurricane. The timing was razor thin. 12 seconds in, 3 to spare. Any later, and they'd be slag. Once inside, they slingshotted beneath Moon Seta 4, barely avoiding automated turrets, before engaging atmospheric stealth and dropping straight toward the dark side of Vel Taraxis. The planet was a black, oily ocean of metal and fire. Massive towers pierced the clouds. Drone swarms moved like storm fronts. And at the center, glowing red with power, stood the Dome of Command, home to the Threxian Overmind. Ray stared at it through the viewing port, jaw tight. This ends tonight. They hit the ground hard. The landing site was a maintenance trench, 3 clicks from the dome, shielded by heat exhaust and electromagnetic interference. Perfect cover. The team moved like shadows, cloaked in grav suits that masked their biosignatures. Silent, invisible, deadly. Every Threxian they encountered was dispatched with brutal efficiency. Blades, not bullets. No sound. When they reached the base of the dome, Ray activated the fusion warhead, a compact, unstable core built by Earth's best scientists. One blast would vaporize half the capital, and more importantly, sever the central command link that gave orders to the Threxian war machine. He looked at Vargas. She was bleeding from the shoulder, but still standing tall. "Timer?" she asked. 4 minutes, Ray replied. "We get to extraction, or we go out with a bang." They turned to run. That's when the Threxians found them. They came like a wave of shadows. Dozens of Threxian enforcers, tall, spined monsters in obsidian armor, poured into the trench from every angle, clicking and hissing in their shrill, metallic tongue. Their eyes glowed like furnace coals, and in the dim red emergency light of the dome's underbelly, the humans looked like ants facing giants. Ray didn't blink. "Scatter and move," he barked. "Stick to the plan." The team broke formation, diving into cover, returning fire with suppressed rifles and micro-grenades. Even with the element of surprise gone, their training held. 2 Threxians dropped before the others could react. Lee and Corporal Dren moved right, flanking the rear. Vargas limped forward, teeth clenched, still firing. Ray stayed in the middle, shielding the warhead. It was live now. There was no turning back. The countdown ticked down, 3:46. "Go! I'll draw them," he shouted. "No chance," Vargas growled. "We started this together, we finish it the same way." Threxian gunfire ripped through the air, a high-pitched pulse that melted steel. One blast hit a wall behind Ray, throwing him to the ground. The wind rushed from his lungs. Another bolt skimmed his arm, burning flesh straight through to bone. He grunted, bit back a scream, and kept moving. Lee's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got movement to the west. Reinforcements incoming." "How many?" Ray snapped. "Too many." The fight turned desperate. The humans ducked behind piping and metal debris, shooting when they could, tossing explosives, trying to hold the Threxians back just long enough for the timer to run out. 254 Dren was the first to fall. A plasma blade tore through his chest as he tried to cover Lee's retreat. No time to mourn. Ray just grabbed his rifle and kept going. 217. The warhead was heavy, even with the grav sling. Ray's body screamed with every step, but he didn't stop. The extraction point was only a few hundred meters away, a vertical shaft that led to an old ventilation tunnel connected to the planet's undersea vents. It was their only way out. If they could reach it, Harbinger could snag them in low orbit before the blast. But the Threxians were closing in. By the time the team reached the shaft, only 4 were left: Ray, Vargas, Lee, and Sergeant Quill. His face burned, one eye gone, dragging his leg behind him. Quill looked up at the tunnel ladder. "I'll stay," he said. "Buy you a minute." Ray turned to argue, but Quill was already unstrapping his last charge. "You said it yourself, Captain. No quiet deaths." Ray met his eyes. No words, just a nod. Quill turned and ran toward the advancing Threxians, screaming like a madman. Plasma blasts lit up the darkness. And then, silence. 141 Ray heaved the warhead into the shaft. "Vargas, climb. You too, Lee." "What about you?" Lee shouted, voice cracking. "I'll rig the final seal. Make sure it goes clean." "No," Vargas said, staring at him. "You're not dying in this goddamn trench." Ray gave her a look, quiet, steady. "You know better. Someone's got to stay. Someone's got to make sure they don't disarm it." Vargas opened her mouth to protest, but the timer kept ticking. 129. "Go," he said. And for the first time, Vargas didn't argue. She just reached out, squeezed his hand once, then began to climb. Lee followed. Ray turned back toward the warhead, bloodied, shaking, but standing tall. A Threxian commander appeared from the smoke, a towering brute with 4 arms, each one wielding a different weapon. It stepped over the corpses of its own soldiers, snarling in its native tongue. Ray raised his rifle. Empty. Didn't matter. "Come on, you son of a bitch," he muttered. 106, the Threxian charged. Ray dove to the side, grabbing Quill's fallen blade from the dirt and jammed it into the creature's underarm as it lunged. It roared, grabbed him by the throat, slammed him into the wall. Bones cracked. Blood spilled. Ray didn't stop. He jammed the blade again, twisting it until the alien collapsed with a screech. Ray fell to his knees, coughing blood, head spinning. 037. He dragged himself to the warhead. Saw the control panel flashing. No errors. Everything in place. He looked up one last time at the shaft. No sign of Vargas or Lee. They'd made it. He smiled. 021. Then he turned back, sat against the wall, and pulled a crushed pack of cigarettes from his vest. The lighter barely worked. The flame danced once, twice, then lit. He took a slow drag. Let's see how gods bleed. At that exact moment, in orbit above Vel Taraxis, the UNS Harbinger picked up the signal. Detonation in 10, 9, 8. The planet lit up from the inside. First a pulse, then a shockwave. Then fire, a ring of it tearing upward, outward, through the command dome, through the crust, through everything. The Threxian capital was gone in seconds, their central intelligence severed. Their empire, blind, and Earth. Earth had just punched a hole straight through a galactic tyrant's heart. Vel Taraxis was gone. Not damaged, not crippled. Gone. The blast wave from the hyperfusion warhead cracked the planet's crust in half. Satellites were vaporized. Moons shifted orbit. The dome of command, the beating heart of the Threxian Empire, was reduced to molten debris scattered across the void like cosmic ashes. The shock wasn't just physical, it was psychological. For millennia, the Threxians had ruled through fear, through overwhelming force, through the illusion of invincibility. And in less than 5 minutes, that illusion was destroyed. By humans. News of the attack spread faster than light. Across Kavor space, across Allied sectors, even into neutral trade routes and outlaw systems, the message was the same. Humanity had done the impossible. Some called it madness, some called it genius. But everyone understood one thing now. Earth wasn't just another primitive species trying to catch up. They were something new, something terrifying. And the Threxians, they felt it. For the first time in recorded galactic history, Threxian fleets stalled. Orders went unanswered. Outposts went dark. Entire battalions defected or fled into uncharted space. The Overmind was dead, or at least cut off, and their AI network collapsed under its own weight. It was chaos, and in chaos, humans thrived. The UNS Harbinger limped back to Kavor-controlled territory 2 days later. Inside, Vargas and Lee sat in silence in the medbay, bandaged, exhausted, not speaking. They hadn't seen Ray since the shaft, hadn't heard a word. They'd barely made it to the upper extraction tunnel when the blast rocked the mountain under their feet and launched them skyward like ragdolls in a cannon. Vargas woke up in orbit with fractured ribs and a shattered heart. He was gone. And the worst part? He'd planned it all along. At the Cavor Senate, the reaction was split. Half called Ray Holloway a hero, the soldier who saved billions, who ended a war with one final brilliant strike. The other half called him dangerous, unstable, a rogue element that had proven just how unpredictable humanity truly was. Strategist Morka Yell stood before the council, his face grave. You asked for a weapon. We gave you a man, and now that man has rewritten the rules of warfare. What happens when the next Ray Holloway doesn't agree with our interests? The chamber fell into murmurs. Some senators wanted restrictions. Some wanted tighter control over human operations. Others, smarter ones, wanted full alliance, immediately. They understood what was coming. Because with the fall of the Threxians, a vacuum had formed. And every lesser empire was watching, hungry to claim the power that had just been released into the galaxy. Back on Earth, Ray Holloway's name was everywhere. But the stories weren't the polished hero tales the media wanted. His former squad mates gave interviews that didn't glorify him. They warned people about his calm under pressure, his recklessness, his willingness to die if it meant sending a message. He wasn't trying to be a savior, Vargas said once on a live feed. He just hated bullies, and he wasn't afraid to burn down the house to take them with him. Monuments were proposed, statues approved, history books rewritten. But among the military, Ray Holloway became something else entirely. A lesson, a symbol. The man who proved that humans weren't valuable because of their weapons or ships or numbers, but because they were chaos, controlled only by purpose, and sometimes not even that. 2 weeks after Veltaraxis, a signal pulsed from deep space, encrypted, human-coded, ancient encryption no longer in use, only one line of text. Tell Vargas she still owes me a drink. Lee nearly choked when he saw it. Vargas went pale, then angry, then hopeful, all in the span of 10 seconds. Where the hell is it coming from? She asked. Edge of uncharted territory, Lee replied, grinning. Looks like someone hitched a ride on a Threxian debris runner. She stared at the blinking coordinates for a long time, then stood. Prep a ship, she said. Lee blinked. You think it's really him? I don't know, she said, jaw tight. But if it is, I'm going to kill him myself. Vargas had never flown this fast in her life. The ship tore through the edge of charted space, past dying stars and radiation belts so intense the hull trembled. Navigation. I screamed warnings every few minutes, but she didn't care. If the coordinates were wrong, she'd burn out the fuel cells trying. If they were right, well, she wasn't sure what she'd do when she saw him. Lee sat beside her, watching her more than the nav feed. You sure you're ready for this? No, Vargas muttered, but he sure as hell is. They found the signal source orbiting a rogue planetoid, a jagged chunk of rock tumbling slowly through the darkness. There were no cities, no ships, no defenses, just a wrecked Threxian transport, half buried in a crater, its emergency beacon still blinking. The human-coded message pulsed once more as they approached. Room service is late. Vargas rolled her eyes. Yup, that's him. They landed on the surface. Atmosphere was thin, barely breathable, just enough to keep a dying man alive. But Ray Holloway wasn't dying. He was sitting on a crate outside the wrecked transport, wearing a patchwork survival suit and gnawing on something that looked like dehydrated meat. He didn't even look up as their ramp lowered. Took you long enough, he said. Vargas didn't say a word. She just walked over, fist clenched, and punched him square in the jaw. He fell backward off the crate, coughing and laughing like a lunatic. I missed you too, he said. You son of a bitch, she shouted. You let us think you were dead. You didn't even leave a message. You—" He stood slowly, brushing off dust. "I had to disappear. You know that. If the Threxians or half the galaxy knew I was alive, they'd come hunting. Earth couldn't protect me. Hell, the Kavor couldn't either." Lee stepped out behind her, arms crossed. "So you've just been camping out here on Rock for Brains planet while the rest of us picked up the pieces?" Ray's smile faded a little. "I've been listening, watching. The war's over, yeah, but something else is coming." Vargas narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" He walked over to a storage unit, flipped a cover open, and pulled out a small black device. It buzzed softly, projecting a map of the galaxy. Parts of it were blinking red, systems going dark, new alliances forming, fleets massing in places no one controlled. "The Threxians kept the other predators in check," Ray said. "With them gone, the real monsters are crawling out of the cracks." He tapped the device. A new symbol appeared. Not Threxian, not Kavor. Something older, something no one had seen before. Vargas stared. "Who the hell are they?" Ray looked up, serious now. "I don't know, but they're watching us. They saw what humans did, what we did." "And now?" Lee asked. Ray looked between them. "Now they want to know if Earth was just lucky, or if we're actually the new threat." Silence settled between them. Then Vargas exhaled slowly. "So we're not done." Ray smiled again. Not the cocky, showboating grin. A smaller one. The kind you wear when you know what's coming next won't be easy. But you're ready anyway. "No," he said. "We're just getting started." Across the galaxy, the Threxian ruins still burned. And in the void left behind, something darker was moving. Watching. Waiting. But now there was one undeniable truth that echoed through every corner of the stars. Humanity had arrived. They didn't ask for permission, and they weren't going away. Not now. Not ever.